So, is anyone else absolutely miffed off at the FIA/race control for this debacle of a Spa race that we just had, or Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps? Because we all subscribed to a wet race on Sunday, didn't you? Because I most definitely did, that's for sure. Because, oh my goodness, how did we end up with just, what was it, 4-5 laps under intermediate tyre? And then even then, it was a drying track where half of the track, or more than half of the track, was dry anyway. Absolutely, utterly ridiculous from race control. And I have just learned as well that race control wasted 2 laps under that ridiculous 4-lap safety car when they had the rolling start, which was a mistake in itself, because they were assessing the grid start procedure. They were assessing whether or not one side of the grid was wetter than the other. I mean, come on, unbelievable dilly-dallying from them both. Lando Norris did make mention of it at the front, and I do actually have a little bit of a conspiracy, really, about this, is that this whole delay of the start of the F1 race, of course, where we had the initial postponements, I think they are adhering a little bit, the FIA, as they maybe did a while ago, a good few years ago, for the Drivers' World Championship, or listening more so to the drivers that are involved in the Drivers' World Championship, because Lando Norris at the front was complaining, as well as Oscar Piastri, about the lack of visibility in the first instance, in the first attempt to get the race underway, where the track was red flagged after half a lap. And well, personally, I don't think the visibility was that poor. Now, yes, I'm not behind the cockpit, but we have seen, like at Silverstone the previous weekend, and at many other race tracks as well, and races, where the weather conditions have been considerably much poorer visibility than what we saw in that first attempt. Yet because Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri are the 2 drivers only in with an opportunity of winning the Drivers' World Championship, they listened to their concerns more, whereas the majority of the field was saying it's okay. Now, in hindsight, yes, that turned out to be probably the correct decision, because the race would have been postponed a few laps later anyway, with that cell of rain that came across and really made the track a deluge and gave us that hour and a bit postponement. That's fine, get that. However, the race should have at least started, or maybe they're not even sent them out there initially anyway, and foreseen that this cell of rain was on its way. But there was just a little bit of an insight of how they're wanting to ensure that the battle at the front, which, yes, us fans are more focused on, let's be honest, than those fighting behind at the moment, because that is where the intrigue is with this championship battle. But that was quite an insight for me personally. Then secondly, we had, of course, Lando Norris come on the radio and say, oh, one side of the track's not as good as the other. Of course, wanting to get an advantage for himself, and also probably, when it didn't work out for him in the end, try and remove a variable of a standing start, where he would possibly lose the lead into the first corner. In hindsight, might have done him a favour because of how the rolling start went, and Oscar Piastri was able to slingshot past him just like Max Verstappen did in the sprint race. But still, at the time, probably what he was thinking, and what happened, they dilly-dallied for 2 laps and ended up adhering to what Lando wanted. Now, many will say it's what Lando wanted, Lando gets what he gets. Disagree with that, because Oscar Piastri is also one who was complaining about visibility for a while, and we should have got this race going a lot sooner, let's be honest with you. We should have had this race going 20 minutes, 30 minutes prior to when they initially started the race, because when they sent the medical car out there initially for its sighting laps, or lap, the track was already drying. Yes, a safety car isn't going to throw off a lot of spray and cause a lack of visibility compared to that of an F1 car, but still, it looked like it was already drying out. There was already a dry line almost forming, pretty much, where the safety car had gone through. So why they then waited a little bit after that, and then waited 4 safety car laps, and 2 of those to decide whether they wanted a standing start or a rolling start anyway, just shows once again a little bit of the incompetency of the race control and of the FIA, as we've seen showcased so often under Mohammed Ben Sulayem's leadership. And well, some of you will be saying, well, it is purely due to health and safety concerns. I get that. Spa, we have unfortunately had some very tragic accidents in the not too not too distant past, and of course we do not want a repeat of that. However, when the lack of visibility is nowhere near as poor as what we have seen it in even the most recent race at Silverstone, why are they not able to go out there and do this? I mean, in the day, the majority of the field today had set up their cars and compromised their setups to ensure that they were better suited for wet conditions, because the weather report was going to be, every single weather report that you checked was all wet weather conditions, and there was always going to be a risk of postponement, as we have seen here at Spa in the past, because the drainage isn't necessarily great because of the altitude that you travel up and down this circuit, and there are areas where the water can gather. But Max Verstappen, as he said, he set up the car for wet weather conditions. We ended up waiting until the track was dry to have a dry race. So is this what we're going to have in the future? Are we never going to have the risk of whether or not you decide to set up for a wet race or a dry race, and just always set up for dry conditions because the FIA will just wait until the track is dry before you start? I mean, that's kind of the scenario we're getting into at the moment, which is absolutely ridiculous. We should have had this race at least start and have probably half of it at least, or more so than what we did at the time, under wet conditions, because it would have provided us as well what turned out to be a boring race, because Spa, unfortunately, in this current set of regulations, is just, I can't believe I'm saying it, a track where you just cannot overtake now. I never thought I'd see Spa with requiring yourself to be on full throttle for over 70% of the lap end up being difficult to overtake, but that is where we are with these current cars. Good riddance to them. Hopefully 2026 causes absolute carnage and completely rewrites how we go racing with F1. Pirelli are also a contributing factor to this. I appreciate them trying to skip a compound and try something different, but I did also think at the same time, you've gone the wrong way with skipping a compound. You've brought a harder compound tyre C1. Yes, you're trying to put off people from using the C1, the hardest compound tyre we can use, because you're going to say it's too slow. But then you've still got a durable enough tyre in the C3, which arguably, if you brought the C2, would be the soft. Allow that tyre to go 30 plus laps at a circuit like Spa. That's utterly ridiculous. Credit to the drivers that were able to do it, because there still was some tyre management involved. There was only really, I guess, Lando Norris really properly pushing, but he showcased even on that C1 that Pirelli's faults of that tyre being too slow, he completely blew that out of the water and proved them wrong, because he was catching Oscar Piastri at a rate of knots. Yes, who was managing, but setting purple laps and doing tremendously well on it. So even if there was dry conditions from the very outset, this would have been a boring one stop anyway, with probably a medium to hard compound tyre, especially or hard to medium, vice versa, or even maybe the soft utilised. But it would have been a one stop anyway, because of how far we saw that medium compound tyre go, which was just ridiculous, because it provided us a boring race in once they went on to the slicks. And it's just, with the wet weather conditions, we would have avoided this. We would have seen the driver skill, the great equaliser, where we have seen races like Interlagos last season with Max Verstappen in much more difficult conditions win a race from the back of the grid. Yes, of course, that did get red flagged, you will say to me, but even when the race got restarted and even when the race was underway, the weather conditions were a lot worse than what we saw at Spa. And also, they allowed them, to race a lot longer as well. And then we also would have seen, of course, drivers being able to utilise their driver skills to overtake more, and without a boring, terrible nullification of the DRS, which I made someone flagged it up to me, and I remember making this claim and issue, or raising this concern last year, that it didn't work, where we saw very little overtaking at all. They reduced the DRS last year, and they maintained that DRS distance for this year, which is concerning, and I'm surprised no one else picked it up, and even myself, I'm a little disappointed I didn't pick it up sooner, that they maintained this DRS distance for the Kemmel Straight, seeing how little overtaking there was last year, and thinking it would still be okay this year as well. They should have extended it to ensure that we had more opportunities for overtakes. So something else to add on top of the debacle of the managing of this race and the start procedure of it by race control, because that is decided by them as well. So just shocking. It's a race of what if. We feel robbed. The drivers feel robbed as well. There'll be some drivers who will be happy, like Liam Lawson, like Pierre Gasly, getting a point, but there'll be many who will be thinking this race should have been a lot more exciting for them and for us fans watching, just like what we saw at Silverstone. But we were robbed of that, unfortunately. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. I worry moving forward with wet weather races. I get it comes down to health and safety, but primarily these drivers, we don't have an issue with these drivers not being able to race in these conditions. It's the visibility, which hopefully should get better, but even still, I am not fully confident with the current management of the FIA and of this sport as it currently stands. Let me know what you think in the comments below.